Your Excellencies, heads of state of the East African Community, the delegation leaders, the Secretary General, members of the Diplomatic Corps, ladies and gentlemen, greetings from the people of Uganda. Thanks for electing me to chair the East African Community Authority for the next 1 year. At this point in history, and given my 65 years of either watching closely or being right in the center of events on our much troubled continent, I feel compelled to use this occasion to bring up the issue of okukonesa, okufubya, miscooking the African Revolution. Okukonesa, kufubya in our languages of the lakes, is a process where the food is not properly or consistently cooked by not applying the necessary heat for the necessary duration, and it ends up being undercooked. Kukona, kufuba. I don't know how they say it in Swahili. You'll give me the Swahili word. The food does not kusya. Kusya is our word there, meaning kuiva. Chakula haiwivi vizuri. The food does not get properly cooked. It becomes emkone. Emkone is the food which is undercooked and you cannot sort it out. It then becomes difficult to cook properly because the insufficient heat initially applied has cooked the food in the wrong direction. The option then is to throw away that food and cook another quantity of food. I have attached a note to this speech from our scientists describing this process, which we the wananchi simply call kukonesa, kufubya, but it's actually science. It is actually science. By 1900, the whole of the African continent had been colonized, except for Ethiopia, which had defeated the Italian imperialists in 1896 at Adowa. This was squarely the fault of the African chiefs and kings who had watched the slow encroachment of these European invaders right from the time when the Ottoman Turks captured Constantinople, Istanbul, in 1453, closing the overland route to Asia for Europe, pioneered by Marco Polo around the years 1271 to 1295. While the Europeans were rightly looking for an alternative route to the east by going around our massive continent, they became slave traders and colonialists when they discovered the weaknesses created by our kings. Our kings were oppressing the people, fighting one another instead of cooperating, failed to adopt new scientific knowledge, e.g. gunpowder. The Europeans invented gunpowder when our kings were here just running around with spears. Many of the kings participated in the slave trade, selling our people. The Bible says the wages of sin is death. It says in the book of the Romans, chapter 6, verse 23. And somewhere else the Bible says, whatever a man sows, that's what he reaps. It says in the book of the Galatians, chapter 6, verse 7 to 8. By 1900, all those African kings were either dead or captured or had capitulated to subservience. They had squandered the time when they could have done the necessary changes to immunize us against domination. Ever since 1498, when Vasco da Gama passed by the East African coast, here in the Zanzibar, Mombasa, attacked Mombasa. Vasco da Gama actually attacked Mombasa and continued to India. It was a whole 402 years wasted. Those kings wasted 402 years. No scientific innovation, no unit among themselves, etc. They paid for their mistakes. Kabarega, our kings there in Uganda, Mwanga, Chetwayo, the one in South Africa, even here Mkwawa, I don't know whether he was captured or what. He tried to fight, etc. were either dead or captured. Unfortunately, the whole of Africa also paid for having slaves torn away from their country, freedom hijacked, resources stolen, etc. Africa, by 1900, was facing a catastrophe. Some of the people that were colonized in Latin America, North America, Australia, were exterminated, or only very few of them are still surviving, and their lands were taken over by other people. However, while the leadership of Africa has been problematic for centuries, the populations are tough, hardworking, and wealth creators for millennia. Unlike the American Indians or Aboriginal Australians, we died during the colonial aggression, but did not perish. Our cattle, goats, sheep, chicken, etc., that stay with us in our hearts, had long vaccinated us against the deadly zoonotic diseases between man and animals that had exterminated the other indigenous peoples. That gave opportunity for new and more potent forces to emerge and become the vanguard of the African resistance. Who were these who resisted? There were two clusters initially. The African-American Pan-Africanists in the persons of W.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, Pademore, etc., and the African National Congress of South Africa that was founded in 1912. The Historical Commission now for the black race and the other colonized peoples was liberation against imperialists through the worldwide anti-colonial movement. In the case of Africa, the historical missions were liberation, ukombozi, uhuru, modernization, creation of prosperity, and provision of strategic security against all threats. How were we to achieve this? Uhuru na umoja, freedom and unity. Unity, freedom would enable us to control our destiny again. Umoja would enable us to address the issue of prosperity and strategic security. How was prosperity to be achieved, and how is it achieved in other countries? With modern economics, prosperity is achieved through the production and sale of the goods or services that one is capable of producing. To sell, however, you need markets. Producers need buyers to succeed. Producers need buyers to succeed. The more buyers you have, the more prosperous you become. This is where economic integration of East Africa and the whole of Africa comes in. If we do not work on this seriously and without wasting time, we betray our people. We connoisseur the African Revolution, miscooking it. The next question is the issue of strategic security against all possible threats. If we do not understand that, we again betray Africa. Strategic security can only come, in my view, from political integration. Why? Political integration through the creation of the regional federations where possible rationalizes the geography of the defended zone so that we are able to be present in the four spheres of the universe. Four spheres of the universe: land defenses, air defenses, defenses at sea, the Navy, and defenses in space. Apart from rationalizing the geography of the defended area, you need necessary muscle, size of land, natural resources, and population. As we speak today, only 4 countries have been to the moon. These are the USA, China, Russia, and India. There are a number of highly developed countries, but they have not been able to land on the moon. They are still here with us also. Is there something to size? In any case, there is no harm in having a big political unit through the political integration, where possible, to conclude this short statement, we need to answer the following questions. These are: if we do not create a big market, how do we intend to encourage and support the wealth creators in the respective countries? If we do not create a big and reliable market for our wealth creators, how do businesses expand to produce more products, create more jobs, and pay more taxes? The answer is, if we are not able, no, the other question is, if you are not able to operate in the 4 spheres, land, air, sea, and space, how do we hope to guarantee our strategic security? Somebody is on the moon looking at you, you don't see him, how do you protect yourself? The ancient area of Africa, East Africa, given the potential to unite all our people around Swahili language, has the capacity to create prosperity and also ensure the strategic security of the black race. Historically speaking, if we use the dedication to the 4 historical missions, we discover that the patriots that fulfilled their mandate were Mwalimu Nyerere, Sheikh Aman Abed Karume, Sekou Toure, Nkrumah, and Modibo Keita. Of these efforts, it's only Tanzania that has sustained the success of economic and political integration. We must salute Tanzania. They are a shining example. Even the struggle for Uhuru liberation was not easy because we had collaborators. However, mainly because of the combination of the African resistance, ANC of South Africa, the Mau Mau in Kenya, etc., the global anti-colonial movement in Asia and Latin America, the emergence of the socialist camp following the victories of the communists in Russia and China, and the imperialists weakening themselves with their inter-imperial wars of 1914, 1918, 1939, 1945. By 1963, a total of 36 countries had got independence in Africa. There was, however, another 20 or so where the imperialists were determined not to surrender. These were Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Angola, Namibia, etc. Some of the countries were on the road to independence, e.g. Kenya and Zambia, but not the others. Literal Portugal was saying that Mozambique, Angola, Guinea-Bissau, etc. were not colonies, but overseas provinces of Portugal. In quotes, imagine. Literal Portugal was saying that Mozambique is an overseas province of Portugal. And that the black Africans can become black Portuguese assimilados by forgetting their culture. While at the OAU conference of 1963 in Addis Ababa, Africa had declared that the whole Africa must be free either by peace or by war, it was only a few countries led by Tanzania under the leadership of Mwalimu that really stood by the freedom fighters. Others were Zambia, Botswana, Guinea-Conakry, Algeria, Ghana under Nkrumah, and Egypt under Nasser. On account of the resistance movements, support of these Pan-Africanists, the socialist countries, and some democratic groups in the West, by 1994, the whole of Africa was free with the majority rule in South Africa. So by 1994, we had spent a whole century trying to liberate Africa from these invaders. And the last country to be free was South Africa in 1994. I'm glad to say that although the revolutionaries in Uganda arrived on the scene late, from 1989, we were able to give serious support to the ANC of South Africa and the PSC in the form of military training, logistics, educational opportunities, etc. Africa had therefore, as the century of shame for African continent, where the whole of it had been colonized and a half a millennium of plunder by the European and Arabs with the slave trade, come to an end, become free. Africa had become free. Uhuru, freedom had come. The question was, where is Umoja? Because you remember, it was Uhuru na Umoja. Uhuru came. Now the question was, where is Umoja? Umoja for economic prosperity through economic integration in order to create big markets to support the efforts of the African wealth creators, and Umoja for political integration where possible to create strategic security for the black race on land, in the air, at sea, and in space. Yes, some of the efforts for economic integration have moved. I worked with Mzee Moi, Mzee Mwinyi, Mzee Mkapa to revive the East African community. You remember this community had broken up. So when we came into government, immediately we started working with Mzee Moi, Mzee Mwinyi, later on Mkapa. We brought it back, 1999. I salute Rwanda, Burundi, South Sudan, Somalia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo for joining the East African community. Let us fully implement the charter of the East African community and the roadmap, as His Excellency Mr. President Ruto was reporting. How about COMESA and the CFTA, the Continental Free Trade Area? Some actors seem to treat this integration as optional. In my view, I have always heard that it is mandatory to unite or risk perpetual marginalization. How about political integration? In the case of East Africa, we the Pan-Africanists have never relented. Ever since the student days in the 1960s, we have been struggling for that integration, supporting our elder Pan-Africanists, Mwalimu Nyerere, Abeid Karume, Kenneth Kaunda, Arap Moi, etc. With Mzee Kibaki, Mzee Mkapa, Prince Kagame, Prince Nkurunziza, we called for the fast tracking of the federation in the year 2014. However, on account of the awkwardness of the African Revolution, seeing what is happening in much of Africa, instead of Uhuru na Umoja, in many countries, in many areas, we have got Uhuru na Uhasama. Is it Uhasama?
Uhasama is correct.
Discord.
Discord.
Yeah. Mnaona Kiswahili changu? Msinichezee. So instead of Uhuru na Umoja, we have Uhuru na Uhasama, freedom and discord. In Uganda, we have a Uganda proverb. It goes like this. Ekitata muhima tekimumala konte. In English, it means that if a muhima, one of the tribes in Uganda, does not die, even if he loses cattle on account of his dedication to cattle keeping, he will do everything possible to get new cattle. Africa is still there. Although we have lost opportunities, but we can catch up. What is the consequence of Uhuru na Uhasama? Uhuru na Uhasama instead of Uhuru na Umoja. Economic stagnation and the suffering of the populations. What is generating the migration of the African youth that are dying in the Mediterranean Sea going to Europe? It is the narrowness of the money economy of Africa that does not create necessary jobs. One of the consequences of not fully integrating our markets, investors get frustrated when they cannot export within even the East African community. The GDP of Africa today, the GDP of the whole of Africa is US dollars 3.6 trillion. The whole of Africa, Africa yote, the GDP is 3.6 trillion. That of the USA is US dollars 31.82 trillion. The GDP of USA is bigger than the one of Africa, more than 10 times. China is now 20.6 trillion. India is US dollars 4.18 trillion. Even little South Korea has got a GDP of US dollars 1.86 trillion. One may ask, why does the little South Korea have the that GDP size? One factor is that South Korea, because of the Cold War politics, benefited a lot from the USA market. However, in our Luganda language we say, Omugo oguli kumulirano chegobango. The stick in the neighbor's house will not help you to scare away the leopard. If the leopard comes to attack you, you are not going to say, I get a stick from the neighbor to chase the leopard. You must have your own stick in your own house. You need your own stick in your own house. You have seen Mr. Trump recently threatening tariffs on South Korea and others. The question we need to ask is, does size of the domestic market matter in terms of attracting investments, domestic or foreign? Because we have got economists, professors, what have you, they are very, very, but I think the size of the market matters. The size of your market matters. Why? China opened up its economy in 1978, when many of the African countries were already under the pastoralism of the World Bank and the IMF, were already investing, implementing structural adjustment, all those things, etc. The Chinese are still communists. Chinese are communists. Yesterday, today, tomorrow. Yet the economy has attracted US dollars 2.7 trillion from outside since 1978, while the whole of Africa has attracted US dollars 1.8 trillion. The GDP of China in 1978 was US dollars 149 billion. 149 billion, that's what it was in 1978, the GDP of China. It is now US dollars 20.6 trillion. India opened up in the year 1991. Since that time, it has attracted US dollars 1.2 trillion in foreign investments. By that time, the GDP of India was US dollars 270 billion, small. India's GDP is now US dollars 4.18 trillion. The three richest countries in the world today are all big countries, big land mass and big population. While we look for foreign markets, the reliable core market is the internal one. It is guaranteed. The richest countries are the USA, China, and India. I appeal to the youth of East Africa, to go back to Uhuru na Umoja. Recently, I met some Gen Z from Kenya. They came to Uganda. that they are experts in organizing riots. And they had come to Uganda to give technical support. to the Ugandan Gen Z, how to riot. But some among the Ugandans said, but you people, why don't we go and see this old man? So these children came. The ones from Uganda and from Kenya, they came. Said, we are experts in riots. I said, okay, I can join you. But what are we rioting for? They said corruption, what? I said, okay, but even if there was no corruption, if you don't address the issues of structure, if you have got a small market, even if there is no corruption, how will the economy expand? So I said, why don't you go and talk about East African issues? So I told His Excellency, I am here with your Gen Z. So I gave them some transport and they went back. I appeal to the youth of East Africa to go back to Uhuru na Umoja. This Uhuru na Uhasama is really a disaster. I had the last supper with Mwalimu in a house near here in Arusha. Mr. Butiku and Mr. Marwa Adam were present. When I arrived for the dinner, I saw a Tanzanian girl who spoke Chihaya, whom I knew, standing on the veranda waiting for me. She was one of Mwalimu's aides. I greeted her in the Chihaya, which is close to the dialects of Uganda. Wabonaki, I said. She answered, Tinka bwene kantushana na boneiwe. Abahaya mwachurra. Mwachurra echo. The greeting is in the form of a question. The question is, what have you seen? The answer is, I have seen nothing special except you now. Then I asked, Nokorono Mugurusi, you work with Mzee these days? Her answer was yes. Mwalimu overheard us. He asked, Mnasema lugha gani? Mwalimu asked us, he didn't know. What language are you speaking? I explained to Mwalimu that all the dialects up to Mwanza are close to Runyankore, my dialect. I was surprised Mwalimu did not know that.
Ladies and gentlemen, a key obstacle to trade in our region is the ever-evolving non-tariff barriers that continue to hinder effective trade between and among partner states. Eliminating NTBs, enhancing infrastructure connectivity, and regulatory harmonization remain a key priority among my stewardship of the community. I am therefore pleased to inform you that our concerted efforts to eliminate non-tariff barriers have yielded results, with the number of reported barriers declining by about 56% from 61 NTBs in 2024 to 27 NTBs in 2025. I am sure that my successor is going to drive this effort into the future to ensure that we eliminate roadblocks and barriers to trade between our partner states. Further, it is encouraging to note that the community continues to harmonize regulatory frameworks to facilitate implementation of commitments under the customs union and the common market to support and enhance trade among partner states. As a result, partner states have developed procedures in sanitary, and phytosanitary measures, compilation and dissemination of statistics, and common procedures for notification among partner states on national regulatory measures introduced by partner states.